Welcome to Pitch It To Me Podcast, a show about the subjective past, present, and potential future of Flesh and Blood design. Today's episode will be about Viserai Runeblood and his newly earned Living Legend status. You can find us across all socials, such as Bluesky and Instagram, at Pitch It To Me Podcast.
I'm Fuzzy.
I'm Clark.
And I'm Joel.
So, some news in the PITM world. Me and Joel have moved in together. We got an apartment together.
Well, we didn't move in for the PITM world. We moved in outside of it, technically.
Well, I mean, like, it's the news for us in the podcast.
I'm just being needlessly pedantic. Yeah, we moved in together.
Yeah, we grabbed an apartment together. This is the first time both of us have lived independently, and we moved in with two other very good friends of the podcast, Josh and Valerio.
Yeah, we're literally roommates now.
We are literally roommates.
So we should really start recording the podcast at your guys' place instead of mine.
Yeah, it's just extremely echoey now, so like the audio would be unlistenable.
Yeah,
unhearable.
Like, the main room is massively echoey. It's a really nice, like, open concept room. But like,
because you guys don't have furniture yet.
What do you? Open concept is crazy.
It's pretty open concept.
It's giving broke chic.
What else have you guys been up to?
Well, immediately after we moved in, I went to an RTN and got 9th again. So that was a bummer. I think it's my
9th out of how many?
I think there was like 28, something like that.
That's not bad.
It was a relatively small one, and it was funny because I lost my first round again. I think that's like the third time I've done that this season, and then I won my next 3, and then my last match, I was literally at table 1. I was going against the 4-0, and I was 3-1 at that time. And I kind of muttered to myself, like as a joke, like, "Oh man, it would be so funny if I lost and got knocked out of top 8 because of my tiebreakers." And sure enough, I lost that game because I drew terribly, and they kept announcing like people with 3 wins in the top 8. I'm like, no fucking shot.
Oh,
and then sure enough, Evan comes over, he fist bumps. He's like, "Sorry, man." I'm like, "Did I get 9th?" He's like, "Yeah."
Oh my god!
I was like, "Yep, that's just the Joel special." Like,
bubble boy.
I'm a bubble boy.
Yeah.
Yep. But we got one more chance.
Is there? Oh yeah, there is still one more RTN, isn't there?
Yeah.
I don't think I'm going to do any more RTNs this season, which means I don't think I can qualify for Nats, which I'm still kind of trying to like come to emotional terms with, that like I qualified the last 2 years. This will be the first time that I haven't qualified in 3 years.
No.
But like also this Nats is really close by. It's going to be really fun, just the whole convention in general. And I'm going to get to play limited calling for the first time. So I'm actually like really hype about that.
Yeah, honestly, I think I'm really... I've never gone to Nats as a player, but this was the first time I tried doing some real RTNs and getting results. And it didn't work out for me. I also bubble boyed twice. I don't know if I got exactly 9th both times, but I definitely... It was just a matter of, like, if one game went differently, I think I could have made top 8 both times.
Yeah. It was not the season for your boys.
No, but it doesn't mean it's the end. I mean, we are at good places to compete with Flesh and Blood. I just think competing in Flesh and Blood takes a lot of goddamn time.
Yeah, it's very time consuming.
So even if we didn't qualify, Joel still might. But even if we don't qualify, you'll still see us at Nats, baby. See you in Vegas.
In other news, do you wanna do it since you're a hero?
Viserai has officially Living Legend.
Wow.
The first of the original 8 heroes, the first ever non-talented hero in the game of Flesh and Blood to hit Living Legend status. And god damn it, does he deserve it. He is a living legend in mine and everyone else's heart.
He's like the fastest of the tortoises.
Yeah, if we think back to your episode, Fuzzy, talking about how these original 8 heroes were designed to be like this baseline for the game, and to be this like foundation that all the classes would be built on moving forward, and how they would try to always be around as an entry point for everyone getting into each class. Viserai being gone is a part of that foundation being gone.
Luckily, there are other Runeblades that can fill his shoes, you know? Like, I think if you liked Viserai before, you might like Florian or Aurora, you know? Both of those have very, like... If you like the rune chants, you can go Florian and the extra tokens. If you like just being an aggressive bum rusher, then you can play Aurora, you know? Like, I think there's ways that ex-Viserai players can still enjoy the game.
Yeah.
Which is something that we couldn't have said for the entire Flesh and Blood career, you know?
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
But I don't want to get into too much substance here. That's what the point of our whole episode is about.
The flow for today's episode looks like it's going to be red pitch. We're going to have Joel going over the History of Viserai. For yellow pitch, it just says Clark here in the notes. I think it's just going to be 15 minutes of me being able to talk about my
you were
beloved.
supposed to come up with a title, and you just left it at Clark.
Well, it's just Clark's pitch. You know what? Yellow, Clark's pitch.
Yeah, because Viserai was Clark's main hero, so he gets his own section where he gets to talk about whatever he wants. That's the deal.
So
and
true.
then blue pitch, Fuzzy is going to design what Viserai's replacement may look like. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and jump into red pitch, the History of Viserai with Joel.
And I'll get into it with the history of Viserai. So it started off with the infamous Scaletta builds, which, if you're unfamiliar, Viserai basically had Bluesky Scaletta, which is a 2-block temper majestic equipment from Crucible. And it said you may destroy this, and your next Runeblade non-attack action and attack action cost 1 less for each of your rune chants.
So you're telling me if I have, like, 5 rune chants, my attack action costs 5 less, and my next non-attack action also costs 5 less?
Correct. But you got to think bigger than that, Fuzzy.
Bigger than 5?
Bigger than 5. Just like the original abusers of this build did. Because what you would do is you would stack up, like, 30 rune chants. You'd spend the whole game. All you do is block and make rune chants. And then you crack this guy, and you play Sonata Arcanics. And you probably know what this is because he still plays it to this day. But it's a X costed spell.
XX costed spell.
XX costed spell. And you reveal the top X cards +1.
+3.
Oh, plus three.
3, yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, because at 0, it reveals 3. And
Yeah.
for every 2 resources, you get to look at 1 more card.
Exactly. So for every pair of non-attack and attack action, you get an attack action card and add it to your hand and deal 1 arcane for each card that you pick up.
Yeah.
Yep. So with Bluesky Scaletta, you would break 30, reveal, like, what is that, 15, 18 cards total?
Yeah.
And you would pick a bunch of the attack actions, because whoop-de-doo, half your deck is attacks, half your deck is non-attacks. You deal, like, 5, 6 arcane at once, and then you just play, like, meet and greet, rune flash, and just burst your opponent. They're probably dead by the 30 rune chants, but you still have, like, 6 attacks to go through.
Yeah.
And if you thought that was really good, you're probably thinking, well, wait, wouldn't, like, Illusionist just run you over? Well, this deck could also just seamlessly go into a mid-range build or an aggressive build. There's just nothing you could do against it. And that's why Bluesky Scaletta was eventually banned, and Viserai lost all of the momentum in his wings, so to speak.
Yeah. Notably, that was also a card that came out in Crucible. Mm-hmm. It was the set immediately following Arcane Rising, so it came...
Right, the first supplemental set.
Yeah, it was the first supplemental set. It came pretty quickly after Viserai got going, but there was probably a very brief moment before that where there were some Viserai builds floating around. But it was definitely just way too much in a world without aggro, right?
Right.
Because I think the combo that you just outlined doesn't exist in a world of Aurora throwing 16 every single turn. Like, you just can't build the rune chants that quickly and live.
Yeah, not into Aurora specifically, but I think you can still find the matchups to do so. Mm-hmm. So then after that, Viserai was really fair for a while. Like, no one was really being able to use him because I think Chain and Prism were both really high at the meta. And if you're going to play, if you have the choice between playing the best Runeblade or the Runeblade that just got nerfed, you're going to play the best Runeblade, which was Chain at the time.
Yeah, Moth Skies was the next big build, and it was also the time that I started playing the hero.
Yeah, this was Mavrian Skies is a non-attack action, 2-block, and it says your next Runeblade attack action gets go again, and if it hits, you make 3, 2, or 1 rune chants. And it was just a go again enabler. And this is also how Viserai was sort of balanced, because he had to dedicate a lot more cards to go wider, and so he wasn't really doing a whole lot in this area. This is also around the time where Oldhim was a thing, and I think Oldhim had a really good matchup into Viserai at the time, I think it was very easy to fatigue him unless you were like Nick Butcher, for example.
Yeah. That was also when Rosetta, there was all this like talk about Rosetta Thorn specifically as a weapon being, it shouldn't have been a Runeblade weapon. It should have been an elemental Runeblade weapon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Because Viserai took it, and then instead of having the 1-for-3 Reaping Blade, he now had a 1-for-4 that also had 2 arcane damage pitched onto it, right?
Yep.
It was 2 arcane, 2 physical.
Yeah.
And so the entire build was just very efficiently going Mauvrion Skies into a 2-cost attack that has Go Again into Rosetta Thorn.
Yeah.
And you just do that over and over and over.
Yeah, I definitely remember like playing Briar at the time and Rosetta Thorn just being so good of a weapon that any Runeblade could use that every Runeblade was just making it their goal to play Rosetta Thorn as efficiently as they could. And because Briar could play it the most efficiently and had some other cool jazz like Channel Mount Heroic, Briar was kind of the de facto Runeblade that everyone played. And I would still see people playing Viserai, you know, like Viserai is a cool hero. His aesthetic is really nice and purple, you know.
God, I do love our purple.
But they tend to lose a little bit to Briar, who just happens to have better tools, you know?
Yeah, ever so slightly. That was also at the time when I think everyone was still beating the drum on, like, does a talent just make every hero better because they get access to more cards?
Right. This was also happening with, like, Oldhim and Starvo versus Bravo. There was just a lot of, like, carnivorous stuff going within the classes. So I think that's why for so long Viserai was not iterated upon. He just fell out of the limelight because we didn't really have the support, the foresight, and the willingness to step in from LSS like we do now. It was just a different time of Flesh and Blood.
Yeah.
And I think they've learned a lot of their mistakes from this time period that we're able to see like heroes like Viserai flourish again. I think the next relevant build in Viserai's journey was like the Turtle Burst build in heavy hitters. He got access to like Bloody Oval, so he could have that extra point of block for those on hits, and he just wanted to stack rune chants as quickly as possible. But it wasn't the fatigue or not fatigue. It wasn't like the build 40 rune chants and kill. What would you say, Clark?
So Turtle Burst was probably the most interesting moment in Viserai's build history to me because Viserai was dead. Warmonger's Diplomacy was printed in Dust to Dawn, which literally said, hey, Viserai, go fuck yourself.
True.
Like, and it obliterated any of his playability. And because it was good into meta decks, everyone had it, right? So even though Viserai was never really this exceptionally strong hero, had just lost Rosetta Thorn to Briar Living Legending, it was like, okay, well, I can still play Viserai at my locals, right? And it was like, no. Everyone has Warmonger's Diplomacy, and that card literally just completely stuffs you.
Yeah.
So it made him completely unplayable. And in the heavy hitters meta, we got the numbers meta, this hyper mid-range numbers meta, and Viserai was forced to find a way of generating better numbers than KO, which seemed impossible. But this heavy hitters list, this Turtle Burst list, was based around turtling up, trying to prevent as much damage as possible while building up as many rune chants as you can during that time, and then providing a burst. This also primarily works off of the way that aggro players will just take little bits of damage because they have a life lead, and then eventually the burst would just be larger than what they could conceivably block. So we hit lethal before they're hitting lethal on us. And it was about 10 or so rune chants and really utilizing Arknight Ascendancy, one of Viserai's specializations. So you just try to pump that to be as large as possible so that, yes, you're throwing a bunch of rune chants, and that's really scary and it's hard to stop that damage. But then also you just have a 10 to 12 power dominated attack that makes rune chants based on how much it hits. And people just couldn't block enough of that, and then that would give us the rune chance to carry over into our next burst and our next burst. So it was about trying to chain those numbers together and just generate bigger spike value turns and let that carry our value over the course of the game.
It's so interesting how Viserai can pivot between, like, is it a meta where we fatigue and build up rune chants? Or is it a meta where we spew out 5-card hands every hand?
And it was after Rosetta came out. He got a lot of really good tools from Rosetta. I think a lot of the cards can be used in any of the Runeblades, like specifically Malefic Incantation is just such a strong card.
Yeah.
But Viserai, I think, was the one that is just, was taking really good use of it with like, what's the 3 go again? Swarming something or other?
Rune Flash.
Not
Rune Rager
Flash.
Swarm.
Rune Rager Swarm, yeah.
Yeah.
They all sound the same.
Yeah. So this is the newest build, right?
Yeah, fast forward to today, he's the best deck in format. He has all these really powerful tools and lets him build up rune chants basically from 0 to 6 really, really quickly. Paired that with like all of the doubling effects with like Mordred Tide. It's just, it was a lot.
Yeah.
And like things like Swarming Gloomveil is still very strong, and Condemned to Slaughter also a really powerful, majestic, and hate piece. Yeah, he just
Condemned to
has
Slaughters are rare.
Succumb to Temptation. That's what I'm thinking of. Sorry. Yeah, Succumb to Temptation.
It's a whole other beast.
Yeah. Succumb. Wacky card.
Yeah, that's a good one. But yeah, that's basically his timeline. I mean, I'm pretty sure everyone already knows about it, but it's nice to go down memory lane and see like what iterations he had, especially Viserai, because I think Clark was saying before the podcast he has a lot of really good iterations, and it sort of stemmed from the very beginning when people would have like this crazy sideboard plan for like 3 different game plans in the same deck.
I kind of love this tradition of like thinking about every big build for a hero ever when they leave the format.
Yeah. And especially with Viserai being one of the original 8 heroes, he's had a lot of time to have a lot of builds.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's going to be super interesting to go through like, well, what are all the different Bravo builds, all the different Tatsu builds,
Yeah.
all the different Dory builds. Like, we're going to talk about Hatchet Story eventually versus Dawnblade versus like maybe a Quicksilver combo. All sorts of fun stuff.
They got to LL first before we die.
So I want to ask you guys, now that we've sort of like set the tone of the episode, is Viserai good design? And before you answer, I'm going to give you like a few contextual points.
Sure.
So the reason why I ask is because his ability is like essentially uncapped. Like as many cards as you can keep is how much more value you got, either 1 or 2 rune chants per card you play after that first non-attack action. And the reason why I felt he was so fundamentally broken and why he was like either at the top or the bottom of the meta was because it didn't take much for him to gain popularity. Like, especially in Rosetta, I think mostly Malefic Incantation and Rune Rager Swarm were just really key pieces in skyrocketing him, and you're welcome to say otherwise. That's just sort of my perception so far. And obviously, he's also extremely resilient. Like, even after chaining, like, multiple Warmonger's diplomacies or disrupting him or just aggroing his face, he just always found a way to either turtle up and set rune chants or outrace you or sort of do this, like, min-range tempo gameplay, all in the same list. Like, Clark's going to talk a little bit about deck expression later, but I think even in the same build, he has so much flexibility in his armor suite and his cards where he can just do whatever he wants to find the best lines to victory. So, with all that being said, what do you guys think?
Clark's letting me talk first.
I'm going to have a whole pitch, baby. I'm going to say what I got to say.
He's got a few things to say.
Yeah.
You know, thinking about it a little, I think with Viserai, you do see a little bit of that, like, early LSS design, especially, like, in his hero, right? Like, they want to reward players for playing with those fundamental mechanics. Some cards are non-attack actions, some cards are attack actions. This guy rewards you from playing both. Ooh, welcome to Flesh and Blood. And the fact that you can just keep making rune chants over and over, there are not a lot of heroes that can get 3 points of value out of their hero power, like, every turn feasibly. Those are really huge numbers that are really hard to combat. And I think if Viserai was made nowadays, it wouldn't have quite as much power on it. I do love how the design is really good at teaching you about the game, you know? Love him as an entry-level hero, but I do think he would be designed a little bit differently nowadays, even for that same purpose.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very much so. And in fact, I would say, is Viserai good design? It's hard because you kind of, when we talk about these original 8 heroes, I think we need to make a we need to be able to distinguish between the class and the hero, right?
Right.
Because so often they are synonymous in that origin. I think Runeblade is good design. I think Viserai is not good design.
Interesting.
Because, I mean, I love his design. So I think starting there, but looking at it in terms of from a game designer, I think it just rewards way too much for winning.
Yeah.
And it's a win more sort of deck. And so everyone's constantly trying to stop you from winning more, but you're designed to only ever win more.
Yeah.
Like, every single rune chant is not just the point of damage, it is also a point of cost reduction for his deck. And, like, I think that's essential to Viserai. I think it is a core element of him. I think Arknight Shard is a fascinating point to that. Arknight Ascendancy. You look at things like Runeblood Barrier, so, like, now it's also a point of offensive and defensive value that you can play around. Like, I think it was all just doing a bit too much for whatever Viserai needed to be doing.
Yeah.
And it was too flexible. It didn't allow us to plant our foot in the sand and say, well, this is our playstyle and this is what we're playing for. In the same way that Vincent gets to, while still having to play around storing power, building up auras on the field, and playing around rune chants for cost reduction. I just feel like Vincent has a more interesting and fun quest than Viserai does.
Yeah, I would agree. And not be for any of, like, my biased reasons, because I actually agree with what you said as well, Clark, that the Runeblade aspect and, like, the aspects of Viserai that are purely Runeblade, or what they intended Runeblade to be from the very beginning, is good design. But Viserai and his hero power and his all of the cards that make him good are not future proofed, like, at all. They're just like you said, Fuzzy, they're just that old LSS design. But yeah, overall I think Viserai 2.0 might actually be a really good show of how far LSS has come as designers.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
I think it's also just so easy to point at, when we talked about the history of Viserai's builds, at no point did we really talk about Nebula Blade, which is supposed to be a signature weapon.
Right.
And I think the fact that Nebula Blade was never really that playable in Viserai is a really big problem.
Yeah.
And I am... Like, he was doing the Runeblade thing of caring about attacking, doing some wizardy, arcane-y stuff, and then, like, also coming in with the weapon. I think, like, he did Runeblade stuff well.
For sure.
But it was just always better to have a one-cost weapon. So Reaping Blade and Rosetta Thorn were just his weapon. And it was never Nebula Blade. I have a cold foil signed Nebula Blade that I have only gotten to play in paper twice because Nebula Blade was just never a good enough build to actually run.
Yeah.
And I think that is sad. And I think it is an example of the small failures that Viserai's design had.
Yeah. Yeah, really well said, Clark. It is a bummer that you didn't get to use Nebula Blade, and you will never get to again. But maybe the next signature weapon he gets, you will be able to enjoy that.
Yeah.
But actually, I'm going to pass it off to you. So whatever you want to say, you can say it now in your yellow pitch. What do you got for us?
Yellow pitch, Clark's pitch. I didn't realize that makes it a little hard to understand what I'm talking about. But I think I'll probably come up with an actual pitch name for the episode. This is going to be what I love about Viserai, right? So... I think I did my equivocating just then in red pitch, right? Of the like, well, yeah, Viserai had some problems. I don't think his design was all that great. Nebula Blade never got to get played. But I love Viserai. It was the very first CC deck I built. And it was my most recent CC deck that I played all the way through the Rosetta meta and through this beginning of the Hunted meta.
Wow, your sandwich hero?
He's my sandwich hero. He is my white bread.
Oh, man.
And so I want to start off actually by talking about what I think Viserai represents as like a character. Because when I first entered Flesh and Blood, I was not looking for particular playstyles necessarily. I was looking for designs and for aesthetics that spoke to me. And I really loved Viserai's design and aesthetics. And especially when I learned the little bit of his lore as like this sad boy who's been tortured his entire life and he's trying to find himself and who he is, like that spoke to me. I think that's a compelling, meaningful story.
Yeah, totally. I'm laughing because it's funny the way you described it, but like, no, I totally like empathize.
Yeah, he was completely tortured by his mentor, Lord Sutcliffe. he had his heart torn out of his body and replaced with the Arknight shard. And then he ends up getting autonomy and being like, yeah, fuck you people.
So
kills
true,
all of them. And then runs away to Arathriel and tries to find himself there. So much of my understanding of Viserai comes through 2024 and how his deck built over that time. How he went from, you know, having this old standard playstyle of the Mauvrion on rate attack with go again into the weapon, right? And you just do that every single turn. And then that sort of got played out and it petered out. And then he had to go find himself. And so we see Sonata Phantasmia and we see Sonata Galaxia and we see him traveling Arathriel and trying to find himself through the card arts.
With his students.
Yeah.
He's going on field trips.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was wondering what's happening to him, and I'm excited to see what's going to happen to him in the future. But that was really the first thing that brought me to Viserai. The second thing is that Runeblade is the masterful blend of magic and damage that so many other games just absolutely fail to capture. Like, half casters in D&D suck. Like, they are bad martial classes and they are bad arcane classes. They do both things worse. So if you like the arcane, just go do the arcane thing. And if you like the physical, just go do the physical thing. That's how it is in most games. Flesh and Blood, with their Runeblade design, I feel like I finally found a design that does both.
Yeah.
Really, really well.
Mm-hmm, totally.
I mean, Spellbound Creepers letting you cast a non-attack action card at instant speed, it's literally like, hey, I know you're a warrior, I know this has Blade Break, but also you get to cast a non-attack action card at instant speed, which is what wizards do. Like, just flavor-wise, that's an insane, incredible win for what Runeblade is trying to be. Similar with Rattlebones and Succumb, having their ability to be cast at instant speed naturally. So that's like what initially drew me to Viserai and kept me compelled by Viserai. But ultimately, I think that can only capture you as long as the play patterns keep you engaged. Mm-hmm. And I think Viserai had some exceptionally compelling play patterns. Most notably, it's about the synergy, not the numbers. Whenever I play Viserai, or let me start it this way. You know how on Talishar, at the end of every single game, there's a little number at the bottom that says average value per turn? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah? When I play Victor, that number can say 17 and 18 sometimes. Right?
Christ.
Because that's what Victor's all about. Victor's about doing the same value every single turn and making that average value as high as conceivably possible. Viserai is going up and down, baby. He is having turns where he is generating no value, and then other turns where he is generating 20 plus points of value. And that makes his average actually way worse, typically. My average value in my Talishar practice games was sitting at around 10, which is really bad. Like, every other deck typically outvalues that. But it's because I am supposed to be waiting for synergy turns, that the value I do create isn't actually realized until later. And I find that a really compelling play pattern. I think it's cool how I can lose a game with a Malefic still on the field, right? Or that Revel still in Arsenal. It encourages me to block more and try to find the space for my big turns and to find places where the synergy comes together. I know a lot of people are conflicted about Malefic Incantation specifically because of how it synergizes with Mordred. And I would say that was probably a broken interaction, right? Can we all agree on that?
Oh, you don't have to commit to me at all.
Malefic Mordred was broken, but it was really compelling how I could use it as a go button, right? It was a way of me looking at my Mordred Tide and saying, is this a good Mordred Tide turn? Do I have enough Malefics out? Or should I try to pitch this for later? Or should I play it for 3 value, 4 value? Do I need to play it as an enabler? I almost think of it a little bit like how Aurora is trying to play around Arc Lightning. Mm-hmm. Right? There are some turns where it's just like, it only throws 2 pings and it gives you a go again on an attack. But sometimes that's all you need for it to be a good turn. And you need that pressure. And other times you want to say, no, I want to wait until I can, also activate Grasp in my weapon, until I can also, maybe pop a gold, or maybe I want to resolve a potion to sit on the field before I activate this Arc Lightning. Maybe I want to wait for it to line up with a Flicker Wisp. That's really compelling to me. Being able to have the cards flex based on what's the matchup? What do I need to do in this matchup? How do I win this matchup? And then also, where am I at in this matchup, right? Mm-hmm. What's the tempo of the game going like? What's the story of this game? Do I need to keep pressure up because they're CYB and they haven't resolved enough CYBs yet? Or have they been casting a lot of early CYBs, so I should be trying to let myself take damage, go under their life total, make Reaping Blade, make their life gain irrelevant, and then do stacking bursts? The exact same cards are completely different based on what is happening inside of the game. And that means that every single turn, I need to recalculate just how much value do I need to get from playing this card versus the value that is left in my deck.
This is going to sound maybe a little bit oblivious to our audience out there, but aggro players have a lot to think about all of the time,
Yeah.
Aggro players are certainly aware of how much value they could get from their cards, but you always have to juggle that for what am I realistically going to be getting this game, this turn, if I play this card now? Do I wait until this card is going to be even better in the future? Or do I just go now and take what I can get because this game might not last that long?
Yeah.
And what you're talking about with these Mordred plays seems like that peak aggro play pattern for me. Why I love aggro decks is this 5-card hand can be played in different sequencing orders, and it might look brain dead to people on the outside, especially if you're sitting across from the table and you're watching that Viserai player just stare at his 5 cards in hand for 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, and you're like, bro, just play all your cards, make a fuck a bunch of rune chants, and kill me. What could you possibly be thinking about?
Oh,
thank you. No, just kidding.
It's become the Arknight. Become the Arknight makes me stop and be like, I went from 4 possible lines to 30 possible lines. Give me a second here. And for me, I loved that. I am an Unga Bunga aggro player. I think I have to acknowledge that at a certain point about myself. Even my Guardian, the Guardian I like, is Victor. Even the Assassin I like is Slippy. I am Unga Bunga aggro player.
Yeah, he loves brewing, quote unquote, and all the brews are aggro heroes.
Yeah. But I really think Flesh and Blood is at its best when the aggro player can, should, and wants to block.
Yeah.
And I think Flesh and Blood is at its best when the control player can, should, and wants to attack. Right? It's always best whenever we are still looking at these archetypes within these distinct play patterns, but they are still encouraged through their list and the meta to still play more mid-rangey. And Viserai, right here at the end, was doing that exquisitely in a way that I don't think he really was at any other point in time through these other lists. I think he was finally rewarded for blocking and choosing your moments very intentionally. And I love that. Trying to find the maximum value you can get out of a 2-card hand and keep your life total high so that you can try to line up as many Malefics on the board with your Mordred. To try to find that Mordred Revel turn. To throw that 1 of 9th Blade that you have in the list. Are you grabbing it with Rattlebones? Or are you tutoring it out with Become the Arknight? It doesn't matter, right? Just being able to find those lines and those moments and those turns in these tight end games and it letting you take on so much more pressure from the opponent, I think it was really healthy. And it felt really healthy. It never felt like the extreme offensive overlap that we got with Zen and the Art of Wars and the Ancestral Harmonies, just layering 2 or 3 anthems on a 10-wide combat chain. It didn't feel that. It didn't feel the same. I felt way more like Viserai's were blocking and playing it safe and letting the other player still have a game plan into them.
There are certain Viserais in our local meta that I really enjoy playing against that would play cards like Tome of the Arknight, which does have that offensive overlap, where you just pay 1 and you get 2 cards every time. And you just take that attack and non-attack on the top of your deck, and oh, look, 6-card hand.
I'm going to end my pitch here by expressing some gratitude for Viserai and what Viserai has meant for me in the game of Flesh and Blood. I appreciate Viserai's strength, Viserai's flexibility, but I also really appreciate how it is a list that has evolved with a hero whose story seems to be about evolution and finding identity, and how that sort of meta-narrative on the outside of the game expressed itself within the game. And I think that's really, really special, and it's not something that we get in a lot of Flesh and Blood, of those two things lining up. And because of that, and because of a James White tweet today, on the day of Viserai Living Legend.
He just never lets us have a moment of a fucking reprieve, man. Just...
I'm going to pull up the exact tweet.
Pull it up.
I will quote the man himself. Farewell to the first of the OG heroes, or until we meet again, ? Viserai is still currently wandering Erathriel, and I don't think that he's going to just disappear into there. I think we are going to get Viserai again, and I cannot wait for that moment. Until then, I'm going to be really excited playing Viserai in Living Legend, where I hear he is still exceptionally strong. And I think it is time that we talk about what that future Viserai may look like. So Fuzzy, please tell me you made another Viserai, right?
Well, I think he'll probably show up in the next set in High Seas, right?
Oh yeah, they're just going to immediately
Viserai,
reprint him, right?
The Arknight.
Oh my god. So anyways, we're hiring for a second host.
New host number 2 wanted.
Yep.
Yeah, so for Blue Pitch today, I'm carrying on our tradition of when a hero hits Living Legend, one of us makes a custom card for their potential replacement. So I'm going to give you my design for the next Viserai. And while it's not a requirement, this is name by name a Viserai hero.
Yes! Let's go, baby!
I think Viserai is an interesting part of the Flesh and Blood puzzle because he's the only untalented Runeblade. So my iteration of Viserai, I'm calling him Viserai Rune Master, as he takes control of his own destiny.
Okay.
Oh, I see. All right.
And he is a Runeblade hero. No talents here, ma'am. When I look back at what my favorite thing about Viserai was, it was his ability to vomit out 4 or 5 card hands and just get increasing value for each card you kept, right? Mm-hmm. It was his ability to play out really aggressively and reward you for keeping big hands. I think the way that he did it before was a little overtuned, but I want to keep that spirit in this design and encourage you to play not just your whole hand, but cards that can trip into other cards so that you're physically playing 4, 5, 6 cards in the same hand.
Even if you don't have 4 or 5 cards literally in your
Exactly. Hand. Cards like Sonata Arcanix, Rattlebones, even to an extent become the Arknight, make it really easy to play cards for the sake of playing cards, similar to how his previous hero ability rewarded you for it. Viserai Rune Master, my design, has 2 lines of text. First, it says, at the start of the game, put an Arknight counter on this card. What's an Arknight counter? I'm so glad you both asked. Let me go to our second line.
Do you want us to ask? We can.
He wanted to ask so bad.
When you play your 4th card on a turn, if it's a Runeblade card, put an Arknight counter on this card. Sorry, I can't stop. Put an Arknight counter on this card, then create X rune chants, where X is the number of Arknight counters on this card.
Ooh.
So he's asking you to go on this little quest of playing 4 cards in a turn. Now, if you have a 4-card hand, you can't pitch one, right? Or maybe you're doing Sonata Arcanix shenanigans to grab cards off the top of your deck. But a lot of those are really inconsistent or they cost resources. So you got to figure out some way to play out 4 cards on your turn and make sure that that 4th one is in fact a Runeblade card. Now, there is increasing value over time with this card because the first time you fulfill this quest, you get 2 rune chants, baby. The second time you fulfill the quest, you get a 3 rune chants. And it's going to be more and more over time, encouraging you to repeatedly assail your opponent with big hands turn after turn. Now, one easy way to do that is to alternate between like actually playing out your 5-card hand and then blocking out an arsenaling or something. Playing out your hand, arsenaling 1, pass. That way you can very consistently every other turn pull this off. So you might not get use of your hero ability every turn. As a matter of fact, if you're playing Runeblade, chances are you're not going to be getting out like a playable 4-card conversion hand every turn. Although notably, this design does not give you a direct incentive to play both non-attacks and attack action cards. That's something I'm letting go with of this design, recognizing that a lot of the tutors that allow you to consistently play out extra cards in a turn are probably non-attacks anyway. There's not like lots and lots of attacks that let you draw cards, at least consistently. But there are cards that also let you do that.
Yeah, very much the card pool already exists in a way that you are spec'd into running attack and non-attack action cards.
And then I gave him 4 intellect and 40 health, like a normal hero, because I think this is normal hero stuff. I also have a design for a weapon, but I want to give you guys a chance to shower me with compliments on this design before I move on.
I kind of like it in this. I'm not a Runeblade player. This might be a reach, but it kind of feels like Duskblade in a way.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're gaining 1 value for every time you complete this like little quest. Duskblade was much easier. You just need to play a non-attack and attack and then swing with the weapon. But this version, you obviously start with a counter, and then every time you complete the quest, you add 1 point to value. And it sort of like doesn't have a cap on it, but it's still a hard requirement because it is 4 unique cards that you have to play. So I personally like it for the fact that you have the quest involved, but you still get a lot of the same payoff, and the rune chant would roll over into your next turn. So I don't know, I kind of like it.
Yeah, I like how this rewards a lot of the cantrippy cards. You mentioned Rattlebones, Ansonata Arcanics, Gorg Tome, maybe even Tome of the Arknight or Sigil of the Arknight being a way of like extending hand size.
Yeah.
But I also want to shout out how good this would be with like a Drawn to the Dark Dimensions. You play a card to give it go again, then you play the Drawn, you draw that new card. Then if you just can get 2 more go again things, I think this would discourage swinging with a weapon.
Yes, that was something that I was very mindful of in this design. It's rewarding you for playing cards, and when you're pitching to swing your weapon, that's 1 less card that you're probably playing on your turn.
Yeah. And in fact, pitching in general is probably something that we're not really doing. This feels like a very natural continuation to the current builds of Viserai.
So you may be wondering, what kind of a weapon did Fuzzy design to go along with such a hero? I call it Pages of Past Agonies. It's a Runeblade weapon. It's a book. 2-handed.
A book? But the books are burned. All of them.
It has a once per turn action that costs 3 resources. And it creates a rune chant and a ponder token.
Holy.
So you're pitching a blue to make a rune chant and get a ponder. And the ponder may be a whole ass card that you can stick in your arsenal. But if you're running blues to make this work, then maybe it's not a card that you want to stick in your arsenal. But it also has another line of text with it. It says, if an attack action card and a non-attack action card were pitched this way, you may put an Arknight counter on your hero.
Yes.
Wow.
I love these kinds of cards.
So my intent for this
Well said, Clark.
So my intent with Pages of Past Agonies is to create something that you can funnel resources into on an off turn. If you don't feel like you can convert your whole hand, maybe you can just pitch into the book, create a rune chant and a ponder, get a card back, help you set up for a future turn. That one rune chant is going to give you a little bit of value back. In my mind, like, a ponder token is potentially worth less than a blue, so you're using your weapon to turn a blue into a ponder token, but it spits out a rune chant as you're doing it. And it doesn't have go again, so I'm not imagining you being able to like really continue and do anything else on your turn. This is kind of like an alternate option when you're not having a pop-off turn, which this hero card is really trying to let you have repeatedly, like have these pop-off turns.
Yeah. I think I'm not a big fan of seeing the pitching and attack action and non-attack action card
Interesting.
line. That's always even when I first initially saw it, even when people were like, well, actually, definitely Duet's a good card because when we get Warmongers, it gives us a chance to... I'm like, nah, fuck off. Like, I think it just incentivizes really low value hands in a way that I don't really enjoy. I much actually prefer the ability to play out my whole hand from underneath the Warmongers because I constructed my deck in a way that lets me get around the Time Walk.
Sure. I'm so surprised to hear you say that, actually, Clark, because when I put this line down, I was flashing back to a time on our podcast where we were talking about, like, the future of Runeblade. I don't even know what the context was, but I just have this image of Clark going, I would love to see more of these pitch and attack action and non-attack action synergy.
I think what I actually said was, I don't want to see more of that.
And that was actually me who said that.
Oh, yeah. Joel. Well, do you like it, Joel? I guess I was designing for you.
Yeah. So I have a few thoughts because it also reminds me of this card, Annals of Sutcliffe.
Yeah.
Which is the other two-handed book, and so that card, for anyone who doesn't know what it is also a once per turn action, costs 3 resources, but it says draw a card. If an attack action and a non-attack action card were pitched this way, create a rune chant. So it's a little bit close to that card, but what I like about this one is that it's tailored to Viserai specifically. Mm-hmm. And also, Ponder tokens are supposed to be more balanced than just straight up drawing a card. So I like that you're including more of LSS's design philosophies, like as of today. And also for some context, the reason why I like the pitching, like the non-attack and attack action portion of these Runeblade cards is because it speaks to a like alternate reality of Runeblade where it's more mid-rangey, it's more pitch stacky, and maybe there's a tankier Runeblade in the future where they are doing more of these things. You play a Diabolic Ultimatum and Deadly Duel or whatever. Maybe you don't. I know you're shaking your head at me, Clark, but I really like that design, so that was really speaking to me. And the fact that, like I said, this card is catered to this hero, this Viserai iteration specifically, because when you do pitch these things, instead of creating a rune chant, you put an Arknight counter on your hero. So even if you're taking these off turns and like resetting your arsenal or using your tempo to the best of your ability, you are building towards this late game scenario, and that's sort of like bridging the gap between the aggressive potential of the previous Viserai and still giving you some longevity to this new Viserai.
Yeah, and that's something I was going for in this design. Like, is there a way to play this hero where you're not just going full face every turn? And having this clause in there gives you an option. And it's also kind of, in my mind, fair. Like, if the whole point is he has to go through this quest to get the Arknight counters, I kind of wanted to provide another way that doesn't make people go like, well, what the fuck? How come he gets to put the counters on anyway when I'm not letting him when I'm still warmongerizing him or he's not keeping a full hand? So pitching 2 cards to make a Ponder, a rune chant, and get a counter for later, I think that feels like in the realm of fair for me. They're not pushing any damage. Maybe you're going to be cute and catch them on an offhand where they can't convert their whole hand, but most of the time you're just giving up a whole bunch of tempo. And you're able to set up with the Ponder token and the Arknight counter, but I think it's pretty fair, you know? And it's there as a backup plan. I want this weapon to be like not the default every turn.
Yeah, breaking from... I mean, it's very interesting. This is the Runeblade class, and you presented a signature weapon book.
It's not like I'm the first one to do it. LSS did it first.
No, they made a Runeblade book, but it wasn't a signature weapon.
Yeah.
Like, I think... Well, then again, Flail of Agony. Flail of Agony is not a sword.
He's also like an angsty emo kid that's like finding his way. They like books too. They read books.
And I guess in my mind,
fine, just call me out like that. Me bringing the 2 fucking bookshelves into our apartment.
And I think I was going for the flavor of like he's passing on his teachings to these disciples that he's accruing.
You know, I know why you keep saying disciples, because of the Sonata Phantasmia art has like all these other figures next to Viserai. I don't think those are people. I think those are statues.
I think they're students.
I don't think any lore has implied that he has students.
Wait, is Viserai Runeblade Jesus?
That's what I'm thinking.
Hey, yo.
That's kind of where I was going here. I was close to calling this like the unholy Bible, but I'm like, nope, 2 on the nose.
I mean, he is kind of reborn from what he used to be. I think that's a very interesting idea of Runeblade Jesus, but...
So those are the designs I came up with. I really liked the aspects of Viserai where you're playing out really big hands, and he, more than any other hero, I think, in Flesh and Blood, will actually play cantrips that grab other cards or tutors that grab other cards, and he does it because if he's rewarded to do it in his hero ability. I think that's actually really cool and something I would hope to see in the next iteration of Viserai. Mm-hmm. If you guys got to see another Viserai printed into the format, what are some things that you think you would like to see that Viserai play into? Joel?
I think I would like to see a hero ability that, I mean, he could still generate rune chants. Because, like, I remember very distinctly when I first started playing Flesh and Blood, one of my good friends, Brian, at the time, he was really obsessed with Viserai lore. And he told me that Viserai was, like, the rune chant guy. Like, he's the one who, like, learned how to make rune chants. So the fact that, like, other Runeblades get to play with rune chants was, like, a little of a flavor loss for him. And so I was just thinking, like, if I were to see him again, I would want to see him with Rune Gate or just more of these cards that get discounted with the rune chant. And I would want Viserai to be de-incentivized from running like these Cheerios builds because I hate him as an aggro deck. He's so powerful. And instead focus on the flavor of these big reduction effects of like Ninth Blade of the Blood Oath, or is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Birthday cake.
Yeah, Birthday Cake. Because those cards were really interesting to me. And I like when they play them, not when they're swinging for like 9 and 9, obviously. But yeah, that was always one of my favorite parts about Viserai was that he could reduce the cost of his bigger, flashier attacks with a threshold of rune chants. And so if he could return to that and be a bit more siloed in that design, that would be like a really good flavor win for me.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say Bloodsheath, Scaletta, Sonata Phantasmia, Bequest the Vast Beyond, Arknight Ascendancy. These are all... I mean, Bloodsheath Scaletta is not in a Viserai specialization, but Sonata Phantasmia, Bequest, and Arknight Ascendancy all are. And all of them are kind of asking for this discount thing to be applied or already have discount applied to them. I think I would also very much like to see something play a little bit into that, whether that's through generating rune chants or through being able to apply additional discounts, right? So, like, if the line on the card text says, discount this for 1 resource for each rune chant you control, then Viserai's ability also did that. That would be interesting, because now you could have leaner rune chants, but still double up, quote-unquote, on the cost reduction. So, like, if you have 1 rune chant, it could actually get 2 off of the next attack.
Yeah, that seems very powerful.
It does.
It would, but it would have to be if you're not making any with your hero ability, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
like, he would
that's
no
true.
longer be making as many rune chants. I would like to see a little bit more lean on into the cost reduction, and I'd like to see a little bit more by way of attacks. Or maybe weapon-centric, something to reward swinging with your weapon. I think they did a great job with the non-attack action cards with Viserai. Now I want to see them lean a little bit more into the attack actions.
Cool. Well, I think that's all I got for Blue Pitch. Are we ready to move on to our Arsenal Zone?
Yeah.
Listeners, if you've never listened to the podcast before, the Arsenal Zone is the part of the show where we talk about a card. It could be a card that we like, a card that we hate, a card that we like to hate. Either way, we're going to talk about it right now, and we're also going to do a Patreon submission. And I think we're going to roll now to see whose card we pick to discuss for this week.
Oh boy,
and the winner is...
Dice roll noise, dice roll noise, dice roll noise.
Gino Jack! Woo! Thank you everyone who submitted, and shout out to Gino Jack. You submitted Knife Through Butter. So Knife Through Butter is a 1-cost, 3-block non-attack action that says... Your next aggro attack this turn gets +4, 3, and 2 at blue. And whenever you attack a marked hero this turn, the attack gets go again. It itself has go again. It's a non-attack action. And they also included Knife Through Butter. Discovered you can make a very different style limited fang with this card. The fact that it gives persistent go again to any attack lets you do whack combat chains. Leading the turn with Knife into... for the Drakai is very silly. You can force a pretty draconic reaction light build and still get away with it if your marking pool is solid. It quickly incentivizes your opponent to let you have +3 fealty rather than perpetual go again. That's actually really interesting. I actually didn't consider that it gives like for the Jukai, for the Emperor, for the whatever cards go again, because you're technically still attacking a marked hero, and then you still buff your first dagger attacks. That's actually really interesting.
Yeah, it seems strong. Like, I've never thought about playing like that in limited, you know?
Yeah.
You have to have the mark like in advance, but that's not that hard.
No, I've really liked doing point of engagement. It's a very similar card to this where you can extend that value over a whole turn if you keep the opponent marked. In a similar way that like this gives go again to attacks if they're against a marked target, point of engagement gives your attacks +1 against a marked target.
Oh, the 0 for 4 at red?
Yeah. Well, 0 for 3, but it +1 to all attacks attacking a marked target. It's like a little anthem. So it's only a 0 for 4 if the very first attack is coming in against a marked target.
Yeah, I mean, a dagger for 5 is probably hitting.
Yeah.
IMO.
I really like both of those designs, and I really like Geno Jack's shout of this like limited Fang that's focusing way more around marking the opponent, because I think that is the more efficient way of getting 3 fealty in limited, is by leaning way heavier on the marking abilities.
This also makes me think about, like, if you're the third Fang in a pool and your seat really sucks and you're just getting all these, like, knife through butters and these, like, public bounty cards or, like, any other card that, like, generically marks, and kind of forging your own build through those specific set of circumstances and letting you, like, still have a decent build even if you're not doing, like, +6 or +8 in reactions. You know what I mean? And I think that's what a lot of people enjoy about limited, not me personally, is that you get to like express yourself through these weird choices like knife through butter to make your to salvage your draft.
Yeah, I always love when the B tier cards come together to make an S tier limited deck and your opponent has no idea what just hit them.
So true, Bessie. You're like, this wasn't on the spreadsheet.
I can see this becoming a really fun CC element of a list where like this sort of build can really help you get to 3 fealty really, really quickly.
I'm nourishing emptiness with go again. Okay.
Pause.
Okay, now what are you going to do, nerd?
Oh, and it fits nicely on a blue. Okay, I'm sold.
Well, then how are you going to swing your dagger if you paid 1 for the knife through butter?
We got the 3rd fealty.
Because nourishing guarantees my 3rd fealty, and then my dagger comes in for 5, and then I play... Yeah.
Get bent, loser.
Exactly. No, really great shout. Thank you so much for submitting the card, Gino.
And thank you to all of our Patreon subscribers.
Yeah, and don't forget to do it again next week, because we might actually shout out your card and say your name on the podcast.
Yeah.
Ooh.
That Gino guy's pretty cool. He's been playing Crucible.
Yeah.
He had a really cool like snapshot Lexi
Dude,
deck.
that list is insane. Like, I think he like crafted this insane line that I actually think would be like, I'm not going to spoil it, and I don't think you should either. But this list, I think, would go crazy in a Living Legend tournament.
Wow.
I told him, like, literally, bro, this list is, like, gas. I don't know. I liked it.
This is why you gotta play in the Crucible.
Honestly, I've really, like, not even trying to plug the Patreon, sign up for Patreon. The Crucible has been a lot of fun to play.
Yeah, I gotta get in next month.
Yeah.
I could not do it this month. Jesus Christ, I couldn't do it this month. But next month, for
what
sure.
you can do, Clark, is you can tell us your Arsenal card for us today.
Sure. I'm gonna stay on theme talking about warrior cards.
Oh.
Sharpened Senses. I think this is... let's describe the card first, Clark. Let's cover our bases, cross our T's, dot our I's. Sharpened Senses is a yellow 0-cost non-attack action card, warrior non-attack action card that blocks for 3. It gives all weapon attacks this turn +1, and if the power of the weapon is greater than twice its base, it gets go again.
They love adding that restriction on warrior cards.
They do. But if you think of this as a yellow 0-cost go again enabler, this card is fucking insane. I think this is probably the most transformational card that Warriors have ever gotten, and more people need to be realizing the power of this card, the utility of this card, and they need to be building decks around this card.
Interesting.
It's a very, very powerful card. I mean, it's no Revel. It's no Mordred.
Thank you for reminding me.
It could be a Mordred, straight up.
Oh, okay. You've lost me.
No. You remember what I said about the two card combo?
I've given you enough patience on this episode, Clark.
I remember when this card was first spoiled and Joel had to explain to me why it's like actually power crapped for Warrior. Like it's better than any other Warrior card they've gotten so far. I also love how, like you were saying, Joel, like it has that line at the end. If the power is greater than twice its base, they get go again. In other words, if you're already warrioring pretty hard, warrior even harder.
If you're winning, win some more. Why don't you?
Hey, I mean, I think Warrior needs cards like that, especially because I think Sharpened Senses is good. I mentioned this earlier in the episode. Mordred type could just be like a 3-value enabler. Just like Arc Lightning can be a 3-value enabler. I think this could just be a 3-value enabler. If it gives +1 and a single source of go again on a weapon swing, then like you're looking at this giving you 3-value. It's +1, and a go again. 3-value on a yellow, 0 cost block 3. That's a good card. We like those cards. But if you line this up on a combo turn where you're swinging multiple times with your weapon, where you need lots of go again, then all of a sudden this is easily 8 or 9 value off of a single card.
In our last episode, Clark talked about Dagger Storm Fang, and I did have to cut a good chunk of that top.
Okay.
So it's
in
good
which case, I'll just mention it here again. With 3 fealty out and a Flurry Storm popping or a Fire and Brimstone, line this up with an Oath of Steel, and you have a 2 to 3 card, 20 plus damage turn. It's insane. More people need to be playing and building around Sharpened Senses.
So for my card this week, I wanted to talk about Flick Knives. Mostly because I've been getting fucking dunked on with this card. So as I mentioned before, I was off to a bad start in my first match because I was just playing really sloppily, I think, and I was also really hot in that LGS. They like are allergic to the air conditioning or something. So I was like, my hands were super clammy. I was sweating. I had a headache. It was just bad. Hot mess. And anyways, I had wax on, wax off combo really early, and I played it against a Arachne Slip Through the Cracks. And what I should have done was wait for them to use Flick Knives so that I could avoid a Kiss of Death with toxicity attached to it and not lose 8 life. Instead, I play the wax off, create my Zen State token, and then in reactions before the Zen State resolves, they flick the knife, I take a shit ton of damage, and I'm like,
baby.
that is an interaction I could have played around. Sick. And I proceeded to do that 2 more times because I made
They pulled off Toxicity Kiss of Death 3 times?
Yes, bro. And I created 3 Zen State tokens that game and still got boomed. Giga boomed. He was a good player. It's not like he lucked his way into insane plays. Like I was like literally looking at it. I saw Flick Knives on the table and I just didn't play around it. And then I played it against another or a Mario later in the day. Haley Neighbors, who's also a local. When I first met her, she played Azuri and also dunked on me with Flick Knives and other assassin cards. I don't like playing against her on assassin. She's very good at it, and not only was I sweating because of the temperature, I was sweating because this was a hard game and I was continually getting dunked on with Flick Knives because she was like doing really powerful like Shaver Bloodshed turns and flicking the knife to like threaten draw cards. I had to get rid of a lot of resources to prevent those draws. So I just wanted to bring up Flick Knives. I like that it's so powerful now. I like that they added a lot of really good support to make this dagger flicking archetype strong, because in Outsiders, when we got all these cards, no one was doing anything with them. Like the most you would see is like, okay, I'm going to Flick Knives so that I can get rid of a ward, hopefully. And so now that it's a full archetype, I like seeing it more, but it's just something that I have not practiced enough against, and I'm hoping that I can figure it out before next week so I can win RTN or win my invite. But yeah, that's my card.
Awesome. So the card that I'm shouting out today is Reek of Corruption.
Ew. Wait, what is that?
It is a card that was printed in Everfest It costs 2 resources. It's a Runeblade card.
Oh.
It swings for a whopping 4 damage.
I hate the number 4 on this card so fucking much.
And it blocks for 3. And it says, if you have played or created an aura this turn, then Reek of Corruption gains. When this hits a hero, they discard a card. So what I like about this card is that Runeblade doesn't get a lot of actual disruption, you know? Like, they just got Succumb to Temptation, and it was a big deal because they got good disruption.
And Snuff Out.
Right, in the same set,
Yeah.
right? And they didn't really have a lot of disruption before that, but they've got cards like Reek of Corruption that, like, they've had, quote-unquote, access to disruption this whole time.
Consuming Volition.
But this card is really not good because
it's so bad.
It's kind of like, it's underrated by 2 points, right? Like, you would hope that if you're paying 2 resources for a card with no go again, it would swing for 6. But it goes under by 2 in the hopes that you're able to get a card out of their hand. And then it's kind of like overrate by 1, quote unquote. If you think of a card as being worth 3 points.
They really wanted you to pummel this card.
They really wanted you to pummel this card. And whenever I see it in my bulk, I'm like, Runeblade with pummel? Reek of Corruption? But then it's just coming in for 8 on hit discard 2, and you've already given like your whole hand to it. So I don't know.
I mean, it can be good with things like Come to Fight and Runic Reckoning as 1-cost curvers that give plus power. So this can come in for 7.
At least with Viserai.
But
then it's a 3-card 8, right? And maybe you can combo with some other Viserai stuff, because with Viserai math, you can always just tack on more cards to it. Reek of Corruption is also a common, so maybe like in commoner games, you can play Pummel Viserai or something. I don't know.
I think that is a thing I've seen people do.
I like this card. I've never seen it played in any context, but I like to think one day maybe it will. It's pretty bad though. And that's the card that I want to shout out today. I also brought a copy for each of you that I'm going to sign and give to you right now. So you can have your very own signed Reek of Corruption. Here you go.
Fuzzy.
Thank you, Fuzzy.
And that's the podcast.
That's the podcast. That's the end of our Arsenal Zone. The end of our podcast. Do we have any ending notes other than obligatory Patreon plug?
Yeah, we're having a lot of fun. The grass is greener over here on the Patreon side of things. And we love all of our patrons. We're having a lot of fun with Crucible, stuff like that. So if you think you would enjoy any of that, give us your money. And we'll see you there. Yeah.
And we're about to go into the next month of Crucible. By the time this releases, I think we will be in like the next month of Crucible, but you can always join like halfway through the month, of course. It's not like you have to be there for the first week. But I just can't announce the format right now to my fellow hosts because I haven't picked one.
Yeah,
I thought you were going to say it was a secret.
well, we do take feedback at the end of every month, and we let the people playing sort of direct what we might do.
Yeah.
The people haven't voted, so I'm not going to pick one, you know? This isn't a dictatorship. You know?
Fuzzy for president.
Yeah.
All right. Well, until next time, guys. Bye.
Bye. Pitch It To Me podcast is hosted by Fuzzy Delp, Clark Moore, and Joel Recinos. Our executive producer is Talon Stradley. Logistics coordinator, John Farkas. Music by Dillon Hulse. Logo by Han V. And sound mixing by Christopher Moore. Last but not least, we'd like to thank you, the listener. Thank you for tuning in. Please give us a follow on your favorite social media platform at Pitch It To Me Podcast.
Oh, there's content here. No, I'm just kidding. Wait, the cardboard Eucharist returns? I'm just kidding.
Never mind, I'm on board.
That was a deep cut.
That's a deep cut that none of our audience will
Oh,
hear.
yeah, that's true. Shit. That's so getting cut.
Outtakes.
I think the design for Viserai does show a little bit of the... I'm going to say that again where I'm not stuttering word for word. Like, you know what? Sometimes when I'm editing, I'm like, come on, spit it out.
Don't worry, I'm going to make you sound so smart. Quid pro quo, you know?
He's going to be a master of his own domain, right?
Yeah? Is that a pun?
Oh, okay. Never mind. We can just cut that joke. Master of my own domain was an innuendo for masturbating. And Seinfeld.
Oh, Seinfeld. Fucking boomer.
Yeah, Clark, notorious boomer of the podcast.